Emma Riley was 23 years old when she first walked into the firehouse at Station 47 in Seattle. It was an October morning, with that bone-chilling damp cold, and she carried her equipment bag with a mixture of determination and nervousness that made her heart beat faster than she cared to admit. The station was located in an industrial neighborhood, surrounded by warehouses and factories, where calls were frequent and almost always dangerous. It was known as one of the busiest stations in the city, and Emma knew this when she accepted the transfer. The other firefighters were already gathered in the living room when she arrived. 8 men sat on worn sofas, some reading newspapers, others watching television. They all stopped what they were doing when the door opened, and Emma entered. The silence that followed was heavy, laden with unspoken assessments. She was used to this kind of reception. Throughout her training at the academy, she had been the only woman in a class of 35 recruits. She had learned to ignore the stares, the whispered comments, the barely disguised doubts about her physical capabilities. Captain Marcus Sullivan was a burly man in his 50s, with gray hair and a face marked by decades of smoke and heat. He rose from the sofa and extended his hand to Emma with a firm grip, but his eyes remained wary. He quickly introduced her to the team, names Emma tried to memorize while facing each skeptical glance. There was Jake, the 15-year veteran who barely nodded; Tommy, a younger man with a condescending smile; Derek, who simply rolled his eyes and returned his attention to the television, and so on, each of them making it clear, without words, that she would have to prove her worth. During the first few weeks, Emma was assigned tasks that kept her away from the actual action: checking equipment, organizing hoses, cleaning the truck. When there was a call, someone invariably told her she should stay in the truck, monitor the radio, remain available for support. She obeyed, gritting her teeth as she watched her colleagues rush into burning buildings, rescue victims, do the real work of firefighters. Emma spent hours in the truck, listening to radio communications, feeling the frustration growing inside her like constant pressure. There was an unofficial hierarchy at the station, and Emma quickly realized she was at the bottom. It didn't matter that she had graduated at the top of her class at the academy. It didn't matter that she could carry equipment as heavy as any of them, or that her running and climbing times were competitive. What mattered was that she was new, she was a woman, and they didn't trust her. Jake made that clear one rainy afternoon, when Emma suggested an improvement to the equipment inspection procedure. He looked at her disdainfully, and said that when she had at least a year of real firefighting experience, maybe her opinions would be worth something. Emma knew that complaining wouldn't do any good. She had seen other women try that route and be labeled as problematic, unable to cope with the environment. So she continued showing up every day, performing her assigned tasks with meticulous perfection, waiting for her opportunity. At night, in her small apartment on Capitol Hill, she studied technical manuals and fire reports, preparing herself for the moment when they would finally let her prove her worth. That moment arrived on a cold December night. The alarm sounded, at 2 a.m, jolting everyone from their deep sleep. Emma was dressed and in the truck before some of the veterans had even finished putting on their boots. The call was for a fire in an old apartment complex in Pioneer Square, an area of the city known for its historic brick and wood buildings that burned like tinder. When they arrived at the scene, orange flames were already licking the windows of the 3rd floor, and black smoke spiraled thickly against the night sky. Captain Sullivan began issuing orders rapidly, assigning teams to different entry points, establishing water lines, coordinating with the other arriving stations. Emma awaited her assignment, her heart pounding. But then Sullivan looked at her and said the words she knew all too well: stay in the truck, monitor the emergency channel, remain ready for support. Emma opened her mouth to protest, but Sullivan's stern gaze made her close it again. She watched her colleagues rush toward the burning building, while she remained behind, once again relegated to the role of observer. But then something unexpected happened. Emma was in the truck, listening to radio communications, when she heard a code that sent shivers down her spine. It was a signal from a firefighter in distress, coming from the 3rd floor where Jake and Tommy had entered. The voice was distorted by static, but the urgency was unmistakable. They were trapped by debris, and the flames were rapidly approaching. Emma looked around, searching for Sullivan or any superior officer, but they were all scattered around the perimeter of the fire, coordinating different aspects of the operation. She had 2 options: wait for someone in authority to show up, wasting precious time while her colleagues were in danger, or act. Emma didn't hesitate. She grabbed a set of equipment, checked her air supply, and ran into the building. The stairwell was filled with smoke, the heat intense even on the lower floors. She climbed quickly, using navigation techniques she had practiced hundreds of times, keeping one hand on the wall, counting steps, moving with deliberate purpose through the suffocating darkness. On the 3rd floor, the hallway was completely filled with smoke. Emma turned on her thermal flashlight, searching for signs of heat through the walls. She could hear muffled screams coming from somewhere to her left. She moved in that direction, passing open apartment doors, some already engulfed in flames. The heat was, unbearable, even through her protective gear, and she could feel the sweat running down her back. He found Jake and Tommy in a collapsed hallway. A ceiling beam had fallen, blocking their exit and trapping Tommy's leg under the rubble. Jake was trying to lift the beam, but he couldn't muster enough strength on his own. When they saw Emma, Jake's expression shifted from despair to shock, and then to something that might have been relief. She didn't say anything, just positioned herself beside him, and together they began to lift the beam. Emma's muscles burned with the effort, but she didn't stop until Tommy could drag his leg out. But getting out of there would be more complicated than getting in. The hallway Emma had come through was now completely blocked by flames. They needed another route. Emma remembered the building layouts she had studied, the old blueprints of historic Seattle buildings. Many of these buildings had external fire escapes connected to the back rooms. She guided Jake and Tommy through an apartment, finding the back window that opened onto an old metal ladder. The ladder was hot to the touch, but intact. One by one, they descended, with Emma helping Tommy, who could barely put weight on his injured leg. When they finally touched the solid ground in the alley behind the building, paramedics were already waiting. Tommy was immediately placed on a stretcher, and Jake, covered in soot and coughing, was taken away to receive oxygen. Emma stood there. For a moment, her hands trembling now that the adrenaline was beginning to subside. It was then that she heard a voice on the radio, loud and clear above the surrounding chaos. It was the Seattle Fire Department chief, Richard Morrison, who had arrived on the scene to oversee the large-scale operation. Morrison was asking for identification, wanting to know who had carried out the rescue. Someone mentioned an identification code, the number Emma used on the radio. She heard Morrison repeat the number, his voice thick with curiosity and something else. Emma saw Sullivan approaching her quickly, his face a complex mixture of emotions. Relief, certainly, that his men were safe, but there was also something that seemed like reluctant admiration, and perhaps a little shame. Morrison found Emma in the alley a few minutes later. He was a tall, thin man, with sharp eyes that seemed to miss nothing. He observed her for a long moment, taking note of her tired but confident posture, the still smoking equipment, the soot marks on her face. Then he asked her name, and when Emma answered, Morrison nodded slowly, as if memorizing every detail. He said he wanted a full report of the rescue, and that she should go directly to his office the following morning. News of the rescue spread through the department even before the fire was completely extinguished. Emma had saved 2 veteran firefighters, navigating impossible conditions and making quick decisions that proved correct. She returned to the station in the early morning hours. The atmosphere had subtly changed. The men who had previously barely acknowledged her presence now looked at her with something different. Jake, still on oxygen, nodded to her with genuine respect. Tommy, before being taken to the hospital, had insisted on thanking her personally, but Emma knew the real test was yet to come. She had broken Sullivan's direct order by entering the building. Technically, she could face disciplinary action for disobedience. When she arrived at Morrison's office the next morning, she was prepared to defend her actions, to argue that lives were at stake, and that she had made the only possible choice. But Morrison surprised her. He wasn't interested in reprimanding her. Instead, he wanted to know why she had been left in the truck in the first place. Emma didn't want to throw her colleagues under the bus, but Morrison was persistent. He asked about her experience at Station 47, about how many calls she had actually answered, about how she was being integrated into the team. Emma answered honestly, without dramatizing, simply presenting the facts. Morrison listened in silence, his face growing increasingly serious. When she finished, he remained silent for a long moment, gazing out the window at the city he had served for 3 decades. Then, Morrison did something Emma didn't expect. He transferred her, not as punishment, but as recognition. He assigned her to Station 19, one of the city's most prestigious stations, known for handling the most complex and dangerous calls. And more than that, he promoted her to technical rescue specialist, a position that required advanced training and would put her on the front lines of the most challenging operations. It was a clear message to the entire department. Competence and courage would be recognized, regardless of gender. The news sent waves through the Seattle Fire Department. Some supported Morrison's decision, seeing it as long overdue. Others complained that Emma was receiving special treatment, that one action shouldn't define an entire career. But Morrison was adamant. He had seen too many talented women marginalized, forced to prove themselves repeatedly, while men with half their competence advanced easily. He was determined to change that, and Emma would be the example. At Station 19, Emma found a different environment. It wasn't perfect. There was still skepticism and occasional distasteful comments, but there was also a willingness to give her a real chance. Captain Sarah Chen, a 20-year veteran who had fought her own battles to reach the position of command, became a mentor. Chen didn't make things easy for Emma. If anything, she was more demanding, but her expectations were based on competence, not prejudice. Emma threw herself into her new role with fierce dedication. She completed certifications in high-angle rescue, water rescue, and advanced vehicle extrication. She spent weekends studying structural engineering to better understand how buildings fail under stress. She became an expert at assessing risks and finding creative solutions to impossible situations. Every call was an opportunity to learn, every challenge a chance to improve. Months turned into years. Emma participated in hundreds of calls, from small residential fires to mass casualty disasters. She developed a reputation for remaining calm under pressure, for asking the right questions, for never giving up even when the situation seemed hopeless. Other firefighters began specifically requesting to work with her on complex operations. She was known as someone who went in first and left last, who never asked anyone to do something she wouldn't be willing to do herself. One particular incident cemented her reputation. It was the collapse of a construction building in downtown Seattle, where a concrete slab had given way, trapping 12 workers under tons of rubble. Emma arrived on the scene as part of the technical rescue team. The situation was extremely unstable, with precarious structures threatening to collapse at any moment. Most engineers on site advised extreme caution, some suggesting that attempting an immediate rescue was far too dangerous. But Emma analyzed the situation with a trained eye. She saw that there was a window of time, perhaps 2 hours, before the structural displacement would make any rescue impossible. She proposed a daring plan, using drilling equipment to create access points through the concrete, stabilizing sections with metal props as they advanced. It was risky, required absolute precision, but it was feasible. Morrison, who was overseeing the operation, looked at Emma for a long moment, assessing the situation. Then he nodded and gave her the authority to lead the rescue. Emma coordinated teams with military efficiency. She established multiple access points, rotated teams to avoid fatigue, and maintained constant communication with structural engineers who monitored the site's stability. For 7 intense hours, she worked non-stop, alternating between supervising operations and physically participating in the most dangerous rescue efforts. When the last worker was pulled from the wreckage, alive but injured, Emma finally allowed herself to rest. 11 of the 12 workers survived, a result considered miraculous given the circumstances. The media coverage that followed brought unwanted attention. Emma didn't like being the center of attention. She preferred to let the work speak for itself. But the story of a young female firefighter leading a complex rescue captured the public imagination. Newspapers ran profiles, television stations requested interviews. Emma declined most, giving only brief statements that emphasized the teamwork and professionalism of the entire department. But the attention had an effect. More women began applying to the fire department, citing Emma as an inspiration. Sullivan, her former captain at Station 47, reached out to Emma a few months after the rescue from the collapse. He seemed uncomfortable, shifting his weight from one foot to the other as he spoke. He said he had reflected a great deal on how he had treated Emma, on the opportunities he had denied her. He didn't exactly apologize, but he acknowledged that he had been wrong, that he had let biases interfere with his judgment. Emma appreciated the gesture, though it couldn't completely erase the frustration of those early months. But she also understood that real change came gradually, one person, one attitude at a time. Emma continued to advance in her career. At 29, she was promoted to lieutenant, overseeing her own team at Station 19. She brought to her leadership the lessons she had learned the hard way, that competence should be the only criterion that mattered, that everyone deserved opportunities to prove their worth, that the best teams were built on mutual respect and trust, earned through actions, not words. Her team became known as one of the most effective in the city, with exceptional rates of successful rescue and safety. But professional success came with personal sacrifices. Relationships were difficult to maintain with unpredictable hours and the demanding nature of the work. Emma had a few relationships that didn't last. Partners who couldn't understand or accept that she regularly risked her life. She sometimes wondered if she had chosen a career that made a normal personal life impossible. But then she thought of the faces of the people she had helped save, the families that had been reunited because of her actions, and she knew she wouldn't change her choices. There was also the emotional weight of seeing things that no one should see. Not all calls ended well. Emma saw people die despite her best efforts, saw injured children, saw destruction and tragedy that left scars on her soul. She learned to process these experiences, to seek support when needed, to recognize that being strong didn't mean never being affected. The department had improved its mental health resources, partly due to pressure from Morrison, who understood that traumatized firefighters couldn't do their job effectively. By the time Emma had been with the department for 10 years, she had become a respected figure not only in Seattle, but in firefighting communities across the country. She was invited to speak at conferences, to help train new recruits, to consult on particularly challenging operations. She used this platform to advocate for change, to push for more diversity in fire departments, for better equipment that accommodated different body types, for policies that recognized that strength came in many forms. Morrison had retired a few years earlier, but before leaving his post, he had pulled Emma aside and said something she would never forget. He said his only regret was that he had taken so long to act, to challenge the system that kept competent women out of the front lines. He said Emma had fundamentally changed the department, that because of her dozens of other women now had opportunities that were previously denied to them. He said she should be proud not only of her individual achievements, but of the path she had opened for others. Emma thought about this often, as she watched her team work, as she saw young female firefighters performing their duties with competence and confidence, without facing the same barriers she had faced. There were still challenges, certainly, still outdated mindsets that needed to change, but progress was being made, one shift change at a time, one rescue operation at a time. And Emma knew that as long as there were people trapped, lives in danger, emergency calls in the middle of the night, she would be there. Not because she was a woman in a male-dominated profession, not to prove anything to anyone, but simply because she was a firefighter, and that's what firefighters did. They showed up, did the job, saved lives. Everything else was just noise. At 32, Emma Riley had become one of the most decorated officers in the Seattle Fire Department. Her wall at home displayed certificates and medals that she rarely looked at, preferring to focus on her daily work rather than past achievements. But an unexpected call from Morrison, even in retirement, brought a proposal that made her reconsider her career path. He wanted her to apply for the position of Deputy Chief of Operations, an administrative role that would take her away from the front lines, but give her influence over department-wide policies and training. Emma struggled with the decision for weeks. Her identity was intertwined with the hands-on work, with being present at emergency scenes, with leading teams in life-or-death situations. The idea of spending days in meetings and reviewing reports felt like a betrayal of what she truly loved doing. But Chen, her mentor, offered a different perspective during a conversation at a cafe near the station. Chen explained that real impact came from changing systems, not just responding to individual emergencies. As deputy chief, Emma could reshape training programs, establish new equipment standards, and create policies that would benefit thousands of firefighters for years to come. The decision became clearer when Emma responded to a call that would permanently change her perspective. It was a massive industrial fire in Georgetown, an area south of Seattle filled with factories and warehouses. The fire had started at a chemical plant, and by the time Emma's team arrived, flames were already consuming multiple buildings. The operation was chaotic from the start, with conflicting commands from different captains, a lack of coordination between stations, and inadequate equipment for the type of chemical fire they were facing. Emma did the best she could with her team, but the disorganization resulted in 3 firefighters being seriously injured, including a young recruit who had joined the department inspired by Emma's story. Visiting the recruit in the hospital, seeing his devastated parents at his bedside, while machines monitored his every heartbeat, Emma realized Chen was right. The failures she had witnessed in that fire weren't about individual courage or lack of skill. They were systemic failures, problems with inadequate training, outdated protocols, and poor communication between units. As a line officer, she could make a difference in some situations. As deputy chief, she could prevent those situations from happening in the first place. She applied for the position the following week. The selection process was rigorous. Emma faced interview panels, presented detailed proposals for operational improvements, and answered tough questions about her vision for the department's future. Some interviewers were skeptical, questioning whether someone with only 10 years of experience was ready for such responsibility. But Emma championed her candidacy with the same determination she had brought to every rescue. She argued that recent experience in modern operations was exactly what the department needed, that fresh perspectives were essential for evolution, and that she had proven her ability to lead under the most extreme circumstances. When news of her selection was announced, reactions were mixed. Many celebrated, seeing her promotion as well-deserved and a sign of progress for the department. Others complained, suggesting that diversity policy had triumphed over merit. Emma ignored the noise, focusing instead on the enormous task ahead. Her first project was to completely overhaul the chemical and industrial fire response protocols, incorporating lessons from the Georgetown disaster. She gathered experts, consulted departments in other cities that had dealt with similar situations, and developed new procedures that emphasized coordination and specialization. But implementing change proved more challenging than Emma had anticipated. Bureaucracy moved slowly, budgets were limited, and resistance to new methods was strong among veterans who had done things the same way for decades. Emma discovered that skills that made her excellent in emergency situations, quick decisions, and immediate action did not always translate well to the world of organizational politics and careful negotiation. She had to learn patience, develop diplomatic skills, understand when to push hard and when to retreat strategically. A particular challenge came from a veteran captain named Robert Hayes, who commanded Station 31 and had powerful allies in the department. Hayes was vocal in his opposition to Emma's changes, arguing that she was wasting resources on solutions to problems that didn't exist. He resisted new training requirements, ignored protocol updates, and encouraged other captains to do the same. Emma knew that confronting Hayes directly could create destructive division within the department, but allowing his insubordination would undermine her authority and put lives at risk. The solution came from an unexpected source. Jake, the veteran Emma had saved years ago at Station 47, was now a captain himself and had implemented Emma's new protocols with excellent results. When his team responded to a chemical fire similar to the one at Georgetown, they executed the operation flawlessly, without injuries, and with rapid containment of the fire. Jake meticulously documented the operation and presented the results at a captain's meeting, concretely demonstrating the value of Emma's changes. Other captains who had been on the fence quickly adopted the new protocols. Hayes remained stubborn, but now he was isolated, his influence diminished. Emma continued implementing reforms. She established a mentorship program that paired recruits with experienced officers, ensuring better integration and knowledge transfer. She pushed for equipment upgrades, eventually securing funding for new communication systems that eliminated the coordination problems that had caused the Georgetown disaster. She developed partnerships with local universities to bring in the latest scientific expertise on fire behavior and modern building materials. Each initiative faced obstacles, but Emma had learned to persevere, to build coalitions, to demonstrate value through concrete results. 3 years after taking over as deputy chief, Emma looked at the department's statistics with genuine satisfaction. Firefighter. Injuries had fallen by 23%. Response times had improved across all seasons. The success rate in complex rescues had increased significantly. And perhaps most importantly for Emma, the number of women in the department had doubled, with retention rates dramatically better than in previous years. She had created an environment where talent was recognized and nurtured, regardless of who possessed it. But the work took its toll. Emma was constantly exhausted, working 60 or 70 hours a week, taking work home, waking up in the middle of the night, worried about budget decisions or contract negotiations. She rarely visited the stations now, rarely felt the heat of fire on her face, or the adrenaline rush of entering a burning building. There were times when she intensely missed that simplicity, that clarity of purpose that came from responding to emergencies. At a desk, problems were complex and ambiguous, solutions not always obvious. It was during one of these moments of doubt that Emma received a letter from a young firefighter named Maria Santos, who worked at Station 19, Emma's own former station. Maria wrote about how Emma's career had inspired her to join the department, about how Emma's training programs had prepared her better than she had imagined possible, about how she had recently led her first successful complex rescue. Maria ended the letter saying that she was doing the work she loved because Emma had fought to create a system where it was possible. Emma read that letter 3 times, feeling a tightness in her chest. She realized she had been so focused on losing the operational job she had loved that she hadn't fully appreciated the new kind of impact she was having. She was no longer saving people one at a time at emergency scenes. She was creating conditions that allowed hundreds of firefighters to save people more efficiently and safely. She was building a foundation for future generations. It was different work, certainly, but no less important. That night, Emma drove to Station 19. It was late, almost midnight, and she found the night shift team in the lounge. Maria was there, and when she saw Emma, her face lit up with surprise and joy. They talked for hours, Emma listening to stories about recent calls, offering advice based on her own experience, feeling connected to the work that sometimes seemed distant from her administrative desk. When she finally left the station in the early hours of the morning, Emma felt renewed, remembering why she had made the choices she had made. At 36, Emma Riley was no longer on the front lines fighting fires, but her impact on the Seattle Fire Department was undeniable. She had transformed training, improved equipment, reformed protocols, and opened doors for several new generations of firefighters. The young woman who had once been told to stay in the truck was now shaping policies that affected every truck in the city. It was a journey she had never imagined on that first cold October morning when she entered Station 47, nervous and determined. But looking back, she wouldn't change a thing. Every challenge, every obstacle, every moment of doubt had been necessary to bring her to where she was, and she knew her work was far from over. There were still changes to make, barriers to break down, lives to protect through better systems and fairer opportunities. Emma was ready to continue this fight, not with fire hoses and rescue equipment, but with equally unwavering determination. Roz applied the task of building a truly better department for everyone.